Hi, I'm Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is my video of Oklahoma Country Road. I saw this photograph and was struck by the unusual colors that presented in the sky, so I decided to give it a try. Beautiful sunset colors, a lot of purples, nice composition with the fence and with the country road. So here's how we go, and I hope you like it. Please give it a thumbs up if you do. And now let's paint. One of the things that struck me about this scene was that it had a nice composition. The background middle ground line was not right at the middle of the paper, but dropped a little bit. There was a nice strong fence to add a structure. Unfortunately, it was in white, which meant either painting around a lot of tiny white lines or using very thin masking fluid, which is what I chose to do in this approach. There was also a very strong white area in the sky, where there was little color, surrounded by brilliant colors. So I decided to mask that in as well as a couple of areas in the road to add some sparkle and some structure to my sketch. I'm actually using the masking fluid as a sketching medium here. Works for me. The masking fluid was on, and after it dried I began sketching some more, but this time with watercolor, a very washed out green. If I sketch lightly, I can remove it easily if I mess up. But sketching with watercolor works to keep things a little looser for me as well. I'm putting in the background, I'm putting in the road outlines, I'm putting in a distant tree outline. And then I'll be working on the sky, which is at the very end or back of this painting. That should be a challenge with all those really fabulous colors. I had done a little bit of overmasking, and I'm removing a bit with my finger, curling it down but keeping it in place. Masking doesn't come off as easily as it goes on. Well, I did my best. I'm using my hands to block, and I'm putting in some water. I'm also using a piece of torn paper to block, right along the tree line. Because I don't want the paint to run all over the place with no control. I want it to stop where the paper's dry, but to flow beautifully where it's wet. So for the sky, I'm starting with a nice yellow color, which is one of the lighter colors. One of the tricks of painting a sky with different colors like this is to not let the colors run together. If you can get them down and keep them sort of separate, you can get a nice, fresh, vari-colored sky. If they all run together, you're going to get a big, mushy mess. So, I'm putting the paint down around the colored areas and not mixing them, by rubbing back and forth or painting back and forth between them. I also have my paper towel on hand. This gives me the most control that I can hope to have with painting in watercolor. This color that I'm using right now is called Quin Violet. But I'm also using some Quin Magenta, some ultramarine blue, and some yellow. This is purple, just plain purple. I'm putting it on rather intensely. Remember, if I want the colors to be bright when they're dry, I have to put them on even brighter when it's wet. Even with this approach, I usually have to apply more layers. Now for the crucial oranges and reds down at the bottom of the painting. I really do have to put them on and then let them mix themselves, because if I mix them all together, I won't have those fresh colors anymore. So I am painting them on and then leaving them be. At the very base of the sky, there is a bright yellow and orange area where the sun is actually coming down onto the horizon. And I took a considerable amount of time trying to capture this and trying to get it right. When you have such a strong color in one section of the sky, it does usually reach upward and affect other areas higher up. They may be much paler, but they definitely do get a touch of that brilliant color as well. I'm not fussing too much with the far right sky because there's going to be some heavy trees silhouetting that area. And it doesn't make sense to spend a lot of time for an area that's just going to be covered up. For some of the darker clouds that are going on last, I've mixed together some indigo, some purple, and some Payne's gray. And I'm putting the color on fairly intense. Random, loose, and strong. In this case and in this time, I'm going back and adding more color, second layers, to glaze and make the colors more brilliant. How brilliant is brilliant enough? I guess it depends on what you're looking for your painting. Now the white's coming off the sky, and we'll see what it looks like. Excuse me, what I meant was now the masking is coming off the sky to reveal the white. And obviously it looks terrible. It needs to be blended and it needs to be shaded in a more subtle manner. But it did retain its whiteness. The fence will do the same. Those will be two areas that will sort of tie together in the finished composition. One of the first things I'm doing is adding a little bit of yellow into the bottom of the white and then blending it heavily to soften. This is not a place where I want hard edges. I want the edges to be soft. And the only way to do that is to go over it repeatedly with more color and then damp brush blending. You can see I've added a little bit of gray to the left side and streaked some clouds over onto the right. I've kept the white in the middle. When I'm satisfied that the sky has got a good start, I'm going to go into the middle ground, which is primarily green with some gold touching where the sunset's going down. And then a deeper emerald gold on the foreground lawn, touched in with emerald green as it goes further and further down. As I begin to add these foreground and middle ground colors, I'm going back into the sky and doing more blending. Now remember that white fence that stretches along the area there? That fence would not hardly even show if I had all pale green in this section. When I take the masking off, the only way it's going to show is if the background is very dark and the fence is very light. So I have to darken the background in the middle there repeatedly. I start on the foreground lawn by just getting some colors in, and at a certain point I decide the colors need some directionality to add some structure to the lawn. So you'll see me begin to add some directionality lines as I paint, sloping downward toward the road. Now the distant tree line is much darker. The lawn against it has a light section where the sun's hitting it and then gets much darker. And then the foreground lawn has a light section where the sun's hitting it and then slopes down into a darker section. So I'm blocking out my color areas and then I'm going to build them up. Here I've taken a mixture of Hooker's Green Dark and some indigo, and I'm painting in the distant tree line. I'm going to make sure I keep that the top is irregular, not perfectly regular, because I think that makes trees look more natural. Each little clump in the distant tree line has a darker side where the sun is not hitting and a lighter side where the sun is hitting. Can you see what I'm talking about as you look at me painting it? I think this adds a little bit of structure and definition, as well as some depth. All these considerations, huh? There's a lot to think about in what do you want to convey in your picture, how much detail you want to get into, and how much depth. At this point, I'm about 3 layers in. I marked in the basics, and I'm going back and repeatedly adding more and more dark color. And it is starting to give the painting some more structure. Can you see what I'm talking about? I've also added some structure with a slope in the foreground lawn, where it's heading down toward the road, with the directionality lines I painted in. Right in the middle where I've left that yellowish green blob, that's where a little tree is also placed. And now the tree has been painted in. It's growing next to the road. So putting these strong darks against this bright, very colorful sky adds a nice definition and ties it together, much like lead came against a dark or against a brilliant stained glass window. And now for the road. I like painting roads. One of the things I've learned over the years is that they need directionality lines too. Lines that would indicate where a car or a tractor or a bike had repeatedly gone over in the same tracks. And they should tie together with the perspective that you've drawn your road with. So if somebody has repeatedly taken a vehicle down this road and then gone around the corner, you could see where the lines will go down the road and then curve around that corner and then go off to the right. As it goes off to the right, it's getting further and further away. So there's less and less detail that I want to show. But right up in the foreground, that's where I want to show some of those tracks. As you curve the road backward, you're also keeping the road horizontal and taking it across. And that ties it together with the perspective. Now, what I'm using is a mixture of Payne's gray and purple. I've also brought in some ultramarine blue. I'm trying to keep a lot of white in the road too, because the gravel is sparkling along there. That's the basic layer, and now I'm going to work on that white fence. First, I'm taking off the masking, and you can see it's standing out pretty well against the background. Since I did not take a lot of time with the masking, the fence is uneven, it's not neatly done, and my decision will be, do I want to keep it looking sort of loose like that, or do I want to tighten it up? And ultimately, I do tighten it up, and that takes a lot of time. But I decided it was worth it, just to tie the whole painting together. I continue to tighten up the wooden planks of the fence. And that's what you see me doing right here, where I painted one in with masking and it went wobbly up in the air. I'm trying to tame it and make it come down again. Here I've taken a wee bit of orange from the sunset into the lit up section of the foreground lawn. And I think it makes the color more natural. You can also see how I've put in those directionality sloping lines into that foreground area. So that whole little section on the right now appears to have some structure and to slope on down to the road. On the right side as well as on the left, there were some trees that were showing from the side view. They come over in front of the whole composition. So I'm beginning to mark them in. I'm starting with some sap green to show where maybe a bit of yellow is showing on to the leaves from all of the sunset colors. And then I'm coming in with my much darker colors. And again, there will be many layers going on here to get them dark enough. But first I'm starting out by masking them in and just getting them where they're at. I should say blocking them in, not masking. When you paint a silhouette against a bright sky, the easiest thing to do would be to paint pure black. And I guess that would work for some paintings, but it's not generally an approach that I would take. because in nature there really isn't much pure black. Even the darkest shades might have a bit of blue or purple in them. And I think that keeping that bit of color makes things look more interesting. I'm enhancing the directionality lines, making them a little darker and putting in some more colors that might be reflected from the sunset. Can you see that bit of yellow and that bit of orange? Now apparently this road was not getting a lot of use because it had some grass growing up along it. Grass was mainly on the right side, so I went down the road in those lines and blocked in some dark green colors to look like there was some grass coming up. It's not very lit up though because it's moving toward the foreground of the painting and away from the light. After I get the colors in, the directionality lines painted in, I blend. And I don't want to overblend because I don't want to make everything go to the same color. I try to keep the colors fresh. I also do some splatter painting on the road to make it look like little rocks and broken asphalt. But the road is starting to work to my eyes. Do you see how that foreground tree on the right side has faded in color? It's going to need some more layers up there. Time for another layer of color on that right side tree. And then there's one more tree in the foreground, and that will be on the left. So here I've mixed together another layer of Hooker's Green Dark and Indigo. Sometimes I will add some purple as well. It makes a good rich dark color that I can build up as dark as I want. There's a big branch extending out in the bottom left. So I'm trying to build that up and gradually bring it outward. Keep trying to keep it look natural at the same time. Off to the left foreground tree. I begin by putting in some dark, rich colors to mark the leaves. You know, I'm trying to make a different kind of tree with different leaves on this side. I'll make the leaves a little finer, a little lacier. We'll see if I can succeed. And at this point, I am getting a little impatient. I just need to finish this tree before the whole painting's done. Sometimes my patience takes over, or my impatience takes over. And I think, oh, let's just get it done. But I think I pulled it off in this case. I'm making some darker lines along the road to make the road stand out. I'm tightening up my fence lines a bit more. And I'm really close to being done at this point. Putting a second layer on the tree on the left to make it stand out in silhouette a little bit darker. and I'm softening some of the colors on the right foreground. Here I have turned the paper in order to paint the line as straight as I want it to be along the top of the fence and the bottom of the fence. The way my fine motor skills work is turning the paper sideways or tilting it like this allows me to paint a straighter line. You may have your own techniques. Maybe a vertical turn will do it for you, or maybe you can paint beautifully horizontally. To me, it's a diagonal turn. Try different things and see what works for you. My signature was put on and the painting was done. I hope you enjoyed watching my video, Oklahoma Country Road. I enjoyed the challenge of painting this because I don't usually paint a sky in this particular tone of purple, and it was very interesting. I tried to work with the compositional components and enhance the whites so they would stand out and pull the whole painting together. Please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Please consider subscribing and ringing the bell so you won't miss any future videos. Check out some of the links I have below if you'd like to find out more about my work and about the products that I use and that I make. I'll see you next video. Keep on painting.